Have you ever wondered why some women do not need to chase, yet men find themselves orbiting them as if caught in a gravitational pull? It is not beauty alone, nor the fleeting charm of flirtation. It is something more elusive, an aura that stirs the unconscious, ignites obsession, and compels the masculine psyche to wrestle with his own shadows. Carl Jung would say that the man does not simply fall for the woman, he collides with the archetype she awakens in him, the mirror she unknowingly holds to his hidden self. And this is the true mystery. She is not performing. She is not begging for attention. She is simply inhabiting her own power. The feminine that understands itself is not frantic, not desperate, not diluted. She knows the quiet rhythm of detachment, the silence that unsettles a man more than rejection ever could. He may laugh, dismiss, even mock her independence, but the moment he retreats into his solitude, he feels the absence like a wound. Why? Because the woman who lives in her own truth is not easily replaced. She does not occupy a man's time. She lodges in his psyche. She awakens what Jung called the anima, the inner feminine within every man, that force he cannot escape without confronting his own incompleteness. Most men are intoxicated by the feminine precisely because they do not understand her. She becomes both a refuge and a storm. In her silence, he hears judgment. In her laughter, he senses freedom. And in her refusal to beg, he feels the sting of his own dependence. This is why some women, without effort, command obsession. They do not give too much, nor do they withdraw entirely. They dance in that strange, in-between space where mystery grows like fire in the dark. You may notice that the men who once mocked you, ignored you, or treated you as replaceable eventually return, not because you changed, but because they cannot reconcile the part of themselves you revealed. You were never merely a woman in their life. You became the key to a hidden chamber in their unconscious. The more they try to shut it, the louder it calls. Jung called this the shadow, the unacknowledged self. And when a man collides with a woman of power, he collides with the very shadow he has tried to suppress. The dangerous beauty of such women is that they do not fight to be understood. They embody paradox without explanation. She is nurturing, yet untouchable, soft, yet unyielding, present, yet detached. This paradox breaks the linear mind of a man who has been trained to believe love is something he can conquer, own, or rationalize. But the moment he believes he has captured her, she dissolves into air, leaving him restless, uncertain, and obsessed. And here lies the psychological snare. The masculine ego thrives on conquest, on proof of worth through possession. But the feminine who knows her worth is not something to be possessed. She is something to be encountered. Her mystery forces him into confrontation with his own emptiness. He asks himself questions he never dared to ask before. Why do I need her attention to feel alive? Why do I fear her silence more than her anger? Why do I feel smaller in the presence of her calm? These questions burn, not because she wounded him, but because she unveiled the wound he always carried. Men often do not realize that obsession is not about the woman herself. It is about the reflection of their soul that she carries. The woman becomes the mirror of his lost courage, his suppressed desire, his hidden longing for the sacred. In Jungian terms, she is the projection screen for his anima, the vessel through which he encounters his own unfinished self. He may resist it, deny it, even attack her to protect his ego. Yet the imprint remains, lingering in his dreams, his fantasies, and his restless nights. This is why certain feminine habits appear almost mystical. When a woman refuses to chase, she unsettles the ego that thrives on validation. When she maintains her silence, she forces him to listen to the noise of his own mind. When she honors herself instead of pleading for his affection, she forces him to confront how hollow his affection truly is. These habits are not tricks. They are unconscious expressions of a woman who has learned to dwell in her own power. And for the man who collides with her, they become unforgettable. Perhaps you have felt this in your own life. Perhaps you have seen men return years later, still haunted, still searching for the closure you never gave, the explanation you never offered. You might think they wanted you, but in truth, they wanted what they saw in themselves when they were with you. The courage, the freedom, the wholeness they could not sustain alone. You awakened them, and awakening is something no man forgets. And so the feminine who embodies her power does not fear being left. She knows that to walk away is not to disappear, but to echo eternally in the psyche of the man who touched her. For he does not remember her body, her words, or her gestures. He remembers the part of himself she revealed, and that is why he cannot let go. There is a peculiar silence that follows a woman who knows her power. It is not the silence of absence, nor the silence of indifference. It is a silence that vibrates with presence, the kind that unsettles a man more than the sharpest accusation. In this silence, the man feels exposed. For the first time, he cannot hide behind noise, charm, or excuses. He confronts the echo of his own need. Jung observed that the human psyche projects onto others what it cannot face within itself. And so, when the feminine withdraws into her mystery, the masculine is forced to face his projections with no shield to protect him. This is why men become addicted to women who carry mystery as naturally as breath. She does not give away her soul in fragments to appease his ego. She lets him wrestle with the void. And men, though they may fight against it, are pulled toward this void as if toward a dark star. The paradox of desire is that it does not thrive on abundance, but on scarcity. Too much given, and it evaporates. Too much withheld, and it starves. But the feminine who dances at the edge, present yet untouchable, creates an unresolvable tension that binds a man's psyche more deeply than physical intimacy ever could. Have you noticed how a man reacts when a woman does not explain herself? He circles her absence like a hunter who cannot find the prey, yet he cannot walk away. He tells himself she is arrogant, cold, or detached, but his words are masks for the deeper truth. She unsettles him because she cannot be defined, and what cannot be defined becomes unforgettable. Men do not dream endlessly of what they can fully possess. They dream of what escapes them. The mysterious feminine inhabits this truth without calculation. Her life itself becomes the dream a man cannot wake from. In ancient Stoic thought, Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that no external thing has power over the soul unless the soul consents to it. Yet the irony is that the feminine who lives by this principle, who consents only to what honors her worth, becomes irresistible. She is not desperate for validation, and that lack of need is precisely what creates desire. The masculine psyche, ruled by conquest, aches to win what cannot be easily won. And so men find themselves returning again and again to the woman who is not waiting. It is important to understand that this power is not manipulation. The feminine does not scheme. She simply exists in alignment with her own depth. She allows mystery to breathe, and in doing so, she awakens the unconscious of others. Jung spoke often of individuation, the journey of becoming whole. But men resist this path, preferring to distract themselves with conquest, work, and noise. When they encounter a woman who refuses to play by those distractions, she becomes the embodiment of the very individuation they avoid. She is not whole because she is untouched. She is whole because she has faced her own fragmentation. That wholeness becomes the magnet men cannot escape. You may wonder why men who seem powerful, confident, or untouchable are often the ones who fall hardest for women of mystery. It is because their public armor is only a disguise for their private void. They crave what they cannot buy, seduce, or dominate. They crave the woman whose presence pierces through their defenses and reveals the hollowness beneath. That revelation terrifies them, yet it also binds them. For obsession is born not from pleasure, but from fear, the fear of losing the reflection of wholeness she awakened. Think of the way men romanticize the woman who walked away, the one they could not control. Years pass, but her image lingers. He compares every woman after her to the one who did not stay, not because she was flawless, but because she awakened something deeper than romance. She became a symbol. In Jungian terms, she became archetypal, a carrier of the eternal feminine. And once a man has glimpsed the archetype through flesh and blood, he cannot forget it. He may seek to replicate it with others, but he will never recreate the same mirror. This is why the habits of feminine power are not strategies to learn, but states of being to embody. Detachment is not a tactic. It is the natural result of knowing your worth. Silence is not a weapon. It is the language of those who no longer explain themselves. Mystery is not a mask. It is the truth that no soul can ever be fully grasped by another. When a woman lives in this truth, she carries an energy that men find addictive. Not because she feeds them, but because she forces them to starve until they confront their own hunger. And here is the irony. The very men who mock, belittle, or reject such women are often the ones who end up circling back, haunted, restless, and unable to move on. For rejection fades, arguments fade, even passion fades. But mystery endures. It lingers in the unconscious like a dream unresolved, and dreams unresolved never die. They return in the quietest hours of the night. A man who encounters a woman steeped in her own power does not simply meet another human being. He collides with the unknown within himself. Jung often described this encounter as a confrontation with the anima, the inner feminine that lives in the unconscious of every man. When a woman embodies presence, silence, and sovereignty, she becomes the mirror through which he glimpses this anima. And that glimpse is intoxicating because it reveals both what he longs for and what he has denied. Men are not addicted to women in the way they believe. They are addicted to what awakens in them through the presence of such women. The laughter of a mysterious woman unsettles not because it is loud, but because it is free. Her refusal to explain herself rattles not because it is cruel, but because it denies him the comfort of control. Her detachment stings not because she withholds affection, but because it exposes how desperate he is for it. She reminds him of his dependency, the one thing his ego cannot bear to admit. This is why silence becomes so dangerous in the feminine. A man can argue with words, but he cannot argue with absence. He can dismiss emotion, but he cannot dismiss a void. Silence forces him into the most terrifying confrontation of all, himself. In her silence, he meets his shadows. He hears the voices of inadequacy, the whisper of failure, the raw need for validation. He may project his anger outward, accusing her of manipulation or cruelty, but in truth, the battlefield is within his own soul. She simply refuses to shield him from it. Stoic philosophy aligns with this truth. Epictetus once taught that no man is truly harmed by another's words or actions, only by his own interpretation of them. And yet, the man who meets the sovereign feminine finds this lesson unbearable. Because her silence, her mystery, and her refusal to chase are interpreted not as neutrality, but as a wound. The wound is not hers, it is his. She has simply unveiled it by refusing to mask it with attention. Have you noticed how men often confuse being needed with being loved? They believe devotion equals worth. But the mysterious woman who embodies power refuses to collapse into need. She may desire, she may choose, but she does not depend. And in that independence, men sense both danger and allure. They feel small in her presence, yet they cannot turn away. She represents the kind of freedom they crave but cannot claim for themselves. And so they attach to her like moths to flame, knowing the fire may burn them, yet unable to resist its light. In Jungian language, this is projection at its most intoxicating. The man projects onto her the qualities he represses: wholeness, courage, freedom, even spiritual depth. He imagines she holds these qualities, but in truth, she only reflects them. When she withdraws, he feels robbed of them, as though she stole something from him. But the reality is more unsettling. She simply revealed what was missing all along. Addiction begins not because she gave him something tangible, but because she revealed something internal he cannot sustain alone. The feminine mystery also awakens obsession because it lives outside the boundaries of logic. Men thrive on clarity, on rules, on certainty. They measure progress, conquest, success. But mystery is unmeasurable. It resists definition, it cannot be timed, and it cannot be conquered. The woman who embodies it dismantles the masculine illusion of control. She forces him into a realm where reason collapses and desire takes over. And in that collapse, obsession is born. It is important to see that this dynamic is not cruelty, nor is it manipulation. The empowered feminine does not set out to addict men to her presence. She simply refuses to dilute herself for their comfort. Her mystery is not performance, it is authenticity. It is the natural result of a life not spent begging for recognition. And in that authenticity, she becomes a force men cannot forget, even if they try. Perhaps you have seen this play out in your own story. Men who left return quietly, unable to explain why they are drawn back. They might invent excuses, unfinished conversations, misplaced regrets, sudden nostalgia. But beneath the excuses lies a deeper truth. They cannot let go of the reflection you once held for them. They cannot shake the way you revealed their hunger, their need, their shadows. You did not bind them with affection. You bound them with truth. And here lies the great paradox. The woman who is most addictive to men is the one who does not try to be. She is not chasing, not pleading, not bending herself to fit their expectations. She lives in alignment with her own depth, and that depth becomes irresistible precisely because it cannot be captured. The more he tries to contain it, the more it escapes him. The more he tries to understand it, the more it evades his logic. And so he circles endlessly, addicted not to her flesh, but to the part of himself she awakened and then withdrew. There comes a moment in every man's life when he encounters a woman whose presence is not merely physical, but archetypal. She does not just enter a room, she shifts the atmosphere, altering the very fabric of perception. Jung would say that such a woman awakens the eternal feminine, an image as old as myth itself, stirring memories buried deep in the collective unconscious. She becomes more than a lover, more than a companion. She becomes symbol, mirror, and initiator. And it is this archetypal quality that makes men addicted, not to her body, not even to her personality, but to the echo of something timeless she carries. The mysterious feminine does not live to soothe a man's fears. She is not here to mother his ego or to feed his endless hunger for validation. She moves differently. She allows him to hunger. She allows him to ache. And in doing so, she awakens the most primal forces of attraction. For desire without hunger is nothing more than comfort, and comfort never binds the soul. But hunger makes men restless, obsessive, unable to forget. And the woman who allows space for hunger is the one he never escapes. Men are taught to believe they are hunters, that they choose, pursue, and conquer. Yet when confronted with feminine power, the roles shift. The so-called hunter finds himself ensnared by his own instincts, trapped not by pursuit, but by longing. The more he tries to distance himself, the more entangled he becomes. The addiction is not to her presence, but to the absence she leaves behind. A woman of mystery knows this, not intellectually, but instinctively. She does not chase because she understands the psychology of energy, that what withdraws becomes sacred and what clings becomes cheap. In silence, she becomes unforgettable. In detachment, she becomes irreplaceable. In her refusal to justify, she becomes eternal. And this is the essence of feminine power. It does not beg to be remembered, it simply is. Men bound by ego struggle with this. They want certainty, guarantees, declarations. Yet it is the uncertainty, the open space, the unresolved tension that keeps them coming back. Desire thrives not in the closure of possession, but in the haunting of incompletion. Philosophers knew this long before psychology gave it words. Seneca warned against attaching one's peace of mind to what could never be controlled. And yet, men attach precisely to the woman they cannot control. Why? Because she represents the very freedom they lack. She becomes the embodiment of what they long for but cannot achieve, the courage to be whole without permission. This paradox fuels obsession. He may curse her, dismiss her, or try to replace her, but deep down, he knows he is not addicted to her as a person. He is addicted to the freedom she represents. Consider the men who speak bitterly of the women who once walked away. Their words drip with anger, yet beneath the anger lies longing. They speak not of wounds inflicted, but of wounds revealed. They call her heartless, yet it is their own emptiness they cannot forgive. She forced them to see themselves without distraction, and that mirror haunts them still. Jung described this as shadow confrontation, when the unconscious rises to the surface and refuses to be ignored. The woman becomes the trigger, the catalyst, but the work is his alone. And here is the hidden danger for men. The more they resist the shadow, the deeper their addiction becomes. They try to bury her memory, but in burying it, they bury the part of themselves she awakened. And the psyche, relentless in its demand for wholeness, will not allow such burial to succeed. The dream returns, the image resurfaces, the obsession lingers. Because it was never about her. It was about him, about the half of himself he refuses to claim. For the feminine, this truth is liberation. She does not need to contort herself to keep a man's attention. She does not need to beg, to plead, or to compete. Her power lies in presence, in silence, in the courage to remain whole, even when others demand fragments. Men may misunderstand this power. They may label it coldness, arrogance, or cruelty. But the wise woman knows these are only projections of a wounded ego. Beneath the accusations lies obsession. Beneath the anger lies hunger. Beneath the dismissal lies desire. And so, the mysterious feminine continues her path, unshaken. She understands that to be addictive is not to perform tricks of seduction, but to embody a depth that cannot be consumed. She becomes the paradox every man craves, the refuge that cannot be possessed, the softness that cannot be conquered, the silence that speaks louder than words. And in that paradox, she holds the masculine in thrall, not by chains, but by mirrors. There is a reason why men often return to the memory of the woman who would not bend. She lingers not because she gave more, but because she withheld what was not hers to surrender, her soul. This refusal imprints itself on the male psyche like a scar that will not fade. Jung would say that the man projects his anima onto her, then suffers when she refuses to embody the fantasy he has cast. Yet in this suffering lies the addiction, for he does not long for her as she truly is. He longs for the part of himself she awakened, the fragment of his soul that feels alive only in her presence. This is the strange gift of the feminine who lives in her power. She becomes unforgettable not by force but by alignment. She is not playing a role, not performing a lure, not studying tactics of seduction. Her magnetism is born of integration. She has made peace with her shadow, and in doing so, she unconsciously invites others into confrontation with their own. Men do not understand this process consciously. They only know that in her presence they feel simultaneously small and alive, broken and whole, hungry and terrified. She becomes the paradox that no logic can resolve. And here lies the danger for him. Obsession grows strongest where resolution is impossible. A man can move on from a woman who explained herself, who offered closure, who pleaded for recognition. But he cannot move on from the woman who remains a riddle. She becomes an open loop in his unconscious, a question that gnaws at him in the quiet hours. The psyche craves completion, yet she offers none. And so he circles endlessly, haunted, addicted to the mystery she embodies. For the feminine, this is not cruelty but truth. She does not owe explanations to soothe his discomfort. Her silence is not manipulation, it is boundary. Her detachment is not rejection, it is self-respect. Her refusal to collapse is not arrogance, it is wholeness. And it is this wholeness that makes her presence so devastatingly addictive. Men chase fragments everywhere, but when they meet wholeness, they tremble. Because wholeness demands they confront their own fragmentation. Imagine the man who prides himself on control, on dominance, on being untouchable. In the presence of feminine mystery, that control falters. He feels drawn in ways he cannot rationalize, undone in ways he cannot defend against. He resists, he mocks, he pretends indifference, but the pull remains. For what he resists is not her, but the confrontation with himself she represents. She is the mirror he cannot shatter, no matter how hard he tries. Philosophy has always hinted at this dynamic. Marcus Aurelius urged men to master themselves rather than the world. But most men attempt the reverse. They chase control outside themselves, never daring to face the chaos within. The mysterious feminine reverses this pattern. She denies him the illusion of control, forcing him back upon himself. And while he may rage against her, the deeper truth is that she becomes the necessary wound that leads to awakening. Addiction, in this sense, is the prelude to transformation. Have you noticed that men rarely speak of the women who begged for them, but endlessly remember the one who walked away without a word? Memory clings not to those who sought validation, but to those who embodied sovereignty. Because sovereignty cannot be replaced. It is not learned through imitation. It is lived through authenticity. The man knows, consciously or not, that he has encountered something rare, something that reflects the sacred. And sacred encounters cannot be forgotten, no matter how much time passes. It is here that feminine power transcends mere attraction. It is not about games or tactics, not about temporary interest or shallow pursuit. It is about becoming archetypal. When a woman embodies her mystery fully, she ceases to be one woman among many and becomes the eternal feminine within the psyche of the man. He may never understand it intellectually, but he will feel it in his bones. She becomes dream, symbol, haunting, an echo that reverberates through his soul. And it is this echo that binds him, this echo that makes him addicted. For the woman who understands this, life changes. She no longer wastes energy trying to prove her worth or force recognition. She no longer fears being forgotten because she knows forgetting is impossible. She has seen the truth that to live authentically, to dwell in silence, to refuse collapse, is to become unforgettable. Men may drift in and out, but her imprint remains. And the more she inhabits this truth, the stronger her magnetism grows, not because she seeks it, but because she has surrendered the need to seek at all. And so, the mysterious feminine walks untouchable, not because she is cold, but because she is whole. Men may chase, resist, or resent her, but they cannot escape her, for she has awakened in them what they most fear and most crave, the confrontation with themselves. And no man forgets the woman who forced him to meet his soul. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.